Okay, guys, I think I know what Barron says to Biden and to Melania. So when he leans into Biden, here, he says, it's on. Okay? And then when he goes up to Melania, she says, try to be nice. See? And he says, okay. But she doesn't really know what he had said to him. And then he turns back and looks back at Biden.
Well, that's the best lip reading I've come across. It's on. It's on. Try to be nice, Barron. Nope. Nope, Mom. We're past being nice. It is on, which basically summarizes the whole of Trump's first week. It's on. It's a new MAGA age has dawned, and there is no going back. You know, there's been a number of articles written of late trying to understand the mass infatuation with Barron Trump. And for me, most of these articles just completely miss the mark. Barron Trump, in many respects, is mythic in that he symbolizes the rightful heir to MAGA. And succession myths have always been prevalent among populations hopeful for the future. So successors were seen as gifts from the heavens and saviors of the people. And one of the great accomplishments of any historic leader was to secure their successors to guarantee the future prosperity of the nation. Now, this depiction of Barron as the heir to the throne, as it were, is part of a dynamic technically known as remythologization. And it's so fascinating because scholars have noted that during particularly disruptive epical changes in civilization, inevitably new myths, a remythologization takes place. And this is because mythology, that is meta-narrative, is intrinsic to our human consciousness. So the Swiss theorist Jean Gebser called it the mythical structure of human consciousness, which he sees as innate. In other words, a mythical conception of the world isn't just some evolutionary throwback that we can chuck now that we've got science and rationality and the like. That, ironically, would be a scientific myth, right? The notion that science represents the emancipation of the human person from superstitious mythology is itself a mythology. The idea that reason emancipates us from tradition is itself a tradition. It's a superstition. It's a myth. When all is said and done, mythos, which is what the ancient Greeks would call it, where we get the word myth from, mythos constitutes the meta-narratives that reveal reality at its deepest and most meaningful level. And as Jordan Peterson likes to point out, the human mind, frankly, cannot make sense of the world without a mythological structure. So scholars such as Gebser and Peterson all argue that that mythological structure of consciousness is still there in the modern mind at a foundational level, and that during periods of extraordinary change and disruption, a new wave of mythologization comes to the surface, and that's what a number of scholars are arguing is happening today. And we're seeing it everywhere, in video games, movies, Netflix series, UFC fights. The notion of classical manhood, of heroism, of kingship, of slaying dragons, it's all coming back and captivating the minds and the imaginations of young men. And this mythic infatuation with Barron Trump, I would argue, is very much part of that phenomenon. Now, just to underscore what an epical moment we're in, take a look at what CNN recently admitted about the future of the WHO, the World Health Organization, that Trump just pulled the United States out of. Check this out.
It does not look like Donald Trump is going to reverse course on this decision. What do you think the result will be?
Well, I'm afraid what it will be is the World Health Organization, which has been around since the end of World War II and includes basically every country in the world. If the United States withdraws, it may well collapse. And what that does is not just make Americans far less safe and secure, but it really sends ripples throughout the world in terms of not being able to detect and prevent and restrain diseases at a very early stage, not being able to share information.
Again, given all of the insanity that's happened over the last 4 years, the patriots over at the Wellness Company want to make sure that you're prepared for whatever woke progressives have left to throw your way. So, for example, just weeks before President Trump's inauguration, California Governor Gavin Newsom declared a bird flu state of emergency, granting himself sweeping powers reminiscent of COVID-19 policies. And this comes after a severe case of H5N1 bird flu was reported in Louisiana. Critics like Nicholas Holscher warned that pandemic fears may be weaponized to challenge Trump's agenda, including the nomination of RFK Jr. to lead the HHS. Is this a health crisis or is this a power play? Well, last summer, Dr. Peter McCullough warned about a bird flu linking the virus's rapid spread to gain-of-function research, now a common practice at many labs globally. Dr. McCullough urges early prevention just in case, recommending a contagion emergency kit from the Wellness Company, his medical board-approved solution with 5 critical life-saving medications: ivermectin, Tamiflu, a nebulizer, and hydroxychloroquine. Every household can now have access to these hard-to-get medications in the event of another pandemic. So get yours by filling out a digital intake form, and your kit arrives within 2 weeks. But don't wait until the deep state puts their plans into action. Stay ready for the unexpected. Click on that link below right now. So that was the former HHS Secretary Kathleen Sebelius openly admitting that the WHO is on the verge of collapse, which of course is absolutely glorious. The WHO is a thoroughly globalist organization that exploits the fears of populations over sickness and disease in order to amass for itself an unprecedented level of global governance over those very populations. So, for example, last year, the WHO tried to impose something called the World Pandemic Agreement. Do you remember this? It was touted as an effort to draw up rules around who does what in the event of another worldwide pandemic. But this treaty included a section called Article 13A. And here's what that article stated, quote, "States parties recognize the WHO as the guidance and coordinating authority of international public health response during public health emergency of international concern, and undertake to follow the WHO's recommendations in their international public health response." So obviously the concern here was that member nations that were to sign on to that treaty would end up surrendering their national sovereignty in how best to respond to a pandemic. If, God forbid, another pandemic happened, it would now be the unelected bureaucrats of the WHO who would decide the rules and protocols for dealing with the pandemic. Moreover, the treaty included things like the right of the WHO to not only mandate vaccines and vaccine procedures, but also who can access all kinds of alternative antiviral drugs, as well as even mandate what can be publicly said, the information that can be allowed to be disseminated regarding the vaccines and the drugs. And this is particularly where Bill Gates' contribution to all of this came in. The Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, as you know, is one of the most powerful and largest organizations in the world. And Gates spent millions of dollars lobbying governments to oppose efforts to waive intellectual property rights over the vaccines, which guaranteed massive amounts of profits for big pharma. And the Gates Foundation, along with similar organizations, have collectively donated $1.4 billion to the WHO since 2020 and about $170 million subsequently, specifically for COVID-related programs since 2020. This according to a report by Politico. So Gates has been at the forefront of all of these efforts at streamlining the medical and media responses to another global pandemic. Well, fortunately, all those efforts were all for naught. The WHO's pandemic treaty collapsed. I mean, it imploded. It was a colossal collapse, especially as more and more nations learned what was in the treaty. But Trump clearly is determined to dismantle not merely the administrative state here at home, but also the globalist world order abroad as well. And one of the ways he's doing that is by pulling the rug out from under the WHO, one of the most pernicious globalist institutions imaginable. So, not only Are we seeing a re-mythologized vision of Trump's eventual successor? But we're also getting a glimpse of the very post-globalist world that he would succeed over as well.